Do you know what's interesting about all these people? None of them are volunteering to off themselves. Bill Gates is an old guy. He's late 60s, I think. Has he offed himself? I don't think so. He's still flying around in a private jet telling us all how we need to reduce our carbon footprint. The carbon they want to reduce is you. You're the carbon they want to reduce.
We discussed a new book, Oligarchs, by author Seamus Brunner on Microsoft billionaire Bill Gates and how his dedication to pushing green technology might not be as altruistic as he was letting on. Brunner argued that Gates stood to gain financially by eliminating competition from non-green sources and forcing people to buy more environmentally friendly companies he had invested in.
But according to Brunner, Gates isn't the only one who's looking to profit from the American people's generosity. Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, perennial boogeyman George Soros also play into a plot to dominate your life. Here now to dive further into this story is the author of Oligarchs, Seamus Brunner. Seamus, so great to have you with us.
Robbie, Brianna, it's so good to see you.
So tell us more about your thesis here. Obviously, these are wealthy figures who support various policies, and we've criticized some of those policies in the past around COVID, around free speech. Talk to us specifically about the green energy aspect of the Bill Gates agenda.
Certainly. So I work with Peter Schweitzer at the Government Accountability Institute, where we follow the money. That's sort of our motto. And usually we're looking into politics, but decided, especially amid the pandemic, to follow the money to the top, to the people who are using the pandemic as a, quote, opportunity. I mean, Klaus Schwab is the guy over there on the left of the book cover, and the World Economic Forum. And then you kind of get into Bill Gates. What's he doing? He's a software guy. How is he the author of our public health policies during the pandemic? And so we followed the money. We saw that they, in some cases, like Mark Zuckerberg's case, he almost doubled his net worth over the course of the pandemic. Bill Gates added tens of billions of dollars. The rest of them did the same. I mean, Elon Musk almost quadrupled up. And so, and that's not a problem. Making money is not a problem. The problem is how they make their money. And that is by sort of seizing control over the industries that dominate every aspect of our life. So we talked about food. There's also energy. There's also transportation. And these billionaires are different than the billionaires of the past. They actually think that their wealth and influence gives them the power and the authority to tell the rest of us how to live our lives.
I am curious about this idea that they are different from the billionaires of the past. I mean, we were recently talking, for example, in the context of the East Palestine rail disaster, about how railroad moguls had lobbied to prevent safety mechanisms that they knew could prevent exactly such a disaster. And the Lever followed up with reporting explaining how even in the wake of East Palestine, oil company Occidental Petroleum lobbied to prevent further safety mechanisms going into effect, even though the country was shocked and horrified by what we saw in East Palestine. You had a story just a week ago come out about how there was proof that the high egg prices people have been experiencing weren't attributable to just post-COVID supply chain inflation, as so many of these companies claimed, but that there was an egg fixing scheme that actually had been in effect. A federal jury ruled that just last week. So it does seem like there's always been a pattern of people who are extremely wealthy using their power to lobby for advantageous tax policies so they can keep more of their wealth, and for legal changes, as we saw in the wake of Citizens United, that allow them to more directly influence our political system and lobby for policies, regulations, and the like that are in their interest, often at the expense of the broader public. So what, in your view, has changed?
Well, and to be clear, yeah, corruption is as old as time. And, the Rockefellers, for example, are a major entity in this book going back to the, early 1900s and what they're up to. And, of course, you've heard of Standard Oil and destroying competition. So what this book is really about is the centralization of the industries, much greater than we've seen it before in the past. I mean, sure, you've got competition, but just take the food example. So for Bill Gates, we uncovered this strategy that Microsoft used in the 1990s. It got it into trouble with the Justice Department. There was the famous antitrust suit, and the strategy was called Embrace, Extend, Extinguish. And in the first phase, in the Embrace phase, Microsoft would enter an industry, then they would expand their reach. They would extend their reach within the industry. This would be the internet browser industry. And all the time they would say, oh, nothing, we're not making any waves. We're just kind of making a great product. But then comes the extinguish phase, and that's where they extinguish the competition. In Microsoft's case, it was Netscape browser, and they wanted to, quote, cut off the air supply. So now you're seeing that in a lot of other industries, in energy, in food, where they want to extinguish the competition. And so Bill Gates, I mean, you played the clip the other day where he says the planet's going to be fine. That's totally different from what he's been saying for years. He's been saying for years there's a climate emergency, a climate disaster. This is why we need to ban cows. Now, the politicians who talk about these policies, they don't use the words ban cows. They say things like, use words like methane and reduction or something. But that is what they're extinguishing the competition there, so that the fake meat companies, those provide the solutions to the hypothetical crisis that I guess Bill Gates says is not actually a crisis anymore.
Yeah. So from my perspective, so I don't, you can disagree, Brianna can disagree. I don't care if a Bill Gates type figure gets to be really successful because he beats the competition or that they can't compete with him. I'm not big into the antitrust kind of stuff. I'm like, well, that's, tough luck. If Microsoft's better than everyone else, that's how it goes. But when I do get concerned is when these billionaires then have all this wealth and influence and can change government policy to either have control over our lives or to make the regulatory environment impossible for competitors, or to get more subsidies for your industry versus this industry, that kind of thing. The word control oligarchs to me speaks to that kind of fear. We know these billionaires get together, World Economic Forum, Davos type things, come up with policies like the ones that emerged during COVID, which weren't voluntarily, right? Which were ostensibly for our benefit, but Joe Biden's administration ended up requiring lots and lots of people that they would have to get the COVID shot, just for one example. And then we know Bill Gates had invested in Pfizer, that kind of thing. So what can you speak to those fears as well?
Certainly, and I agree with you. To your point, it's not a problem just making money by making a better product that people love and turn you into a gigantic corporation like Microsoft. The problem really becomes when you use your power and influence to change the regulations to make the playing field uneven. And so with the energy sector, the control that's happening there is sort of insane. I mean, I didn't think it was true, but just imagine for a second, you wake up in the middle of the night freezing. I mean, in the example in the book, people wake up in the middle of the night sweating. It's the middle of a heat wave. You go to your thermostat, you try to change the temperature in your home, but you find you've been locked out. The utility company has locked you out. You don't have control over the temperature in your own home. Amazon's making smart thermostats that have this capability. Google's making smart thermostats that have this capability. And so when their companies seem to benefit from you losing control over certain facets of your life, that's a big problem. And so we've tracked down every industry that they're doing this kind of stuff in.
I wonder, do you cover some of the examples that come to mind for me in the 90s, automobile manufacturers and oil companies targeting and trying to kill electric car development, or some of the lobbying that utilities, to take your example, have done to try to prevent people from buying and installing their own solar panels?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge problem. The fact that, regulations prevent you from being able to go off grid. I mean, even collecting rainwater in some places is a problem. You can't have backyard chickens in some places. And this is really what the whole theme of the book is the centralization of power. And to your point, intellectual property plays a huge role. It's really about the patents. I mean, Bill Gates did not invest in the fake meat companies like Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, until they had secured the patents on protein change, which seems sort of Orwellian or dystopian in and of itself Monsanto's in the book with Terminator seeds. Patenting foods and seeds seems wrong, and especially if you're working to ban the generic equivalent, which would be like cows. So we kind of get into how patents grant an individual a 20-year long monopoly. And so with the oil companies like Standard Oil and the Rockefellers, they have taken this new green position, but it's only after they secured investments into the so-called green companies. So, solar and wind is really like the patented technology. Oil and gas is like the generic. All of the patents, in a lot of ways, have run out on the way to get traditional carbon sources of energy, which is why it's so cheap and abundant. But the new technologies, those are all patented, and you can't really have like a wildcatter, scrappy young guy go out and strike a claim in an oil well in the nuclear power or wind industries. There can be no Jed Clampetts, Beverly Hillbillies in the solar and wind and nuclear industries. They're tightly regulated, they're tightly controlled, and they're becoming tightly monopolized.
Seamus, it seems like what you're describing in some ways is a kind of corporate capture that obviously billionaires, given their affluence, are able to affect. So I wonder what you see as a solution. The left-leaning response would be to say, let's look at antitrust, let's look at caps on wealth, or at least a wealth tax, to try to limit the extent to which these people can use their money to lobby government specifically for regulations that are favorable to them. What, in your view, is the correct response to this problem?
I'd be careful with regulations just because it can have unintended consequences. I think the biggest thing people need to do is take a personal responsibility and vote with their dollars. And buying local, as simple as that sounds, and it's actually harder than it seems because it can be more expensive. But not giving money to the monopolies as best as you can. Maybe starting a backyard garden in terms of the food. And with the chickens and all of that. But it's really voting with your dollars. In terms of regulations, I think we need to stop funding these public-private partnerships. It's kind of like welfare for oligarchs. A lot of these supranational organizations like the World Economic Forum, why do they need our tax dollars to fund the World Economic Forum or the World Health Organization? Bill Gates has basically funded the World Health Organization, so why do we need to fund it? So there's a lot of taxpayer money that is going in the form of welfare to corporations that Bill Gates owns. TerraPower is his nuclear power company. That gets tens of millions, if not over $100 million in taxpayer assistance. And if it's a profitable idea, if it's a great idea, then they don't need the taxpayers' welfare.
So thankful that you were here and bringing up the intellectual property aspect of this. I think that's really important and undercovered, and is something that both people on the right and left can be really worried about abuse of that entire concept, just being totally unfair and not in the social best interest. The book is Oligarchs, and we're so happy to have you here with us, Seamus Bruner. It's been a pleasure.